Okay, hold on a sec.
All right. So I'm Laura Ayon. I'm the director of the Reading, Advising, and Mentoring Program, which is one of our two TRIO Student Support Services projects here at Cal Poly Pomona. And I've been here I've been here over 28 years.
And my name is Patricia Duran Quesada. I'm the director for the Arches program. And before being at the Arches program, which is a grant program that's similar to the RAMP program, I actually worked as a lead counselor at the Career Center. So a lot of this information is information that we would share with our students. So going on to the next one.
All righty. So we're just going to run through a bunch of tips that, as Patricia said, that we've learned over the years. And I depend on Patricia a lot because of her time with the Career Center. I think brings a lot of wisdom as well. But one thing is that I don't want to. I cannot overemphasize that you should not underestimate the importance of your student employment. Whatever, even if it's not related to your major, um, you working during college can have an impact on your future career. And I would say, at least for the first job or two. And we're going to share some tips that'll also tell you why that might be the case. If you are currently working, do you mind giving me a thumbs up? Got a couple of thumbs up.
Oops.
Yes, cool. Whether you realize it or not, working while going to college provides opportunity to gain experience, develop transferable skills, network, and you can start building your resume. A few things to keep in mind. You never know who may be watching or listening. You're making an impression with someone who might have some influence on your next job. You will likely list your student position when you apply for future jobs after graduation. And many employers will call your supervisor or references. And so you want to think about, what do I want them to say about me, right? So you got to start thinking about that now. And you might request a letter of recommendation from your current supervisor. You want to make sure that they've had a chance to get to know you, your work ethic, what your goals are, what drives you, what motivates you, and a little bit of your personality. Next. Tip number 2, apply for summer jobs, internships, or research experience. So I want you to not think of your summer as time off, but as an opportunity to get hands-on experience. Maybe it's an opportunity to do a research project or a research program, go out of state. So we're already in March. If you haven't already started thinking about what you want to do this summer, you need to do so now, and start putting in applications. If it's and while you're doing that research, you might find that you missed some deadlines, but that's okay because at least now you know that for next summer. So for this summer, there should still be some opportunities, even if they're not your like the best options or your number one option. You want to be organized and searching for these opportunities. As I said, you want to start early. So, now you should, by this time, you should already know what you're going to do for the summer. And if you're like, oh my goodness, I'm behind, do the research so that you can start preparing for next summer. It's never too soon. And while you're doing that, you're going to find that there are some opportunities still available. If you are working right now, can you continue to work with during the summer with whatever organization you're currently working with? So if all else fails, that could be an option. But I know the summers, we want to rest and refresh and recoup. But if you can also do some of that and get some experience, you'll be in better shape. Next one. All right, tip number 3, you want to be thorough when you're applying for employment or other opportunities. Your application is the first impression. Make sure you're answering all the questions completely and submit all required documents such as a cover letter, resume, list of references. Do not submit your cover letter or resume without having somebody else take a look at it. Again, it's your first impression. So, you know, even with student positions, when Dustin and I are reviewing those applications, there might be a little something that I'm like, I'm not sure. Like, you don't want that person to have any reason to pause, right? And we get it. Okay, maybe they were rushing through it, or maybe, we all make mistakes. All of us do. And so we have to give a little grace when we're reviewing these. But that first impression kind of can cause me to kind of pause. So that's why it's important to possibly have somebody else review your application before you submit it, especially the resume and cover letter. And if they're not asking for a cover letter, perhaps you can still submit one. And if it doesn't have a place for you to submit, maybe via email. Use the Career Center's services for assistance in preparing the application and your supporting documents. They're experts in this. They have resources. They have online resources. So, don't bypass that excellent resource. I think it's an underutilized resource. And once you use it, you come to realize how beneficial it is. So please, please, please use it. And of course, you have other resources available to you, whether it's RAMP or Arches or EOP, Writing Center, Kellogg Honors College, Ronco Scholars, peer mentoring, your faculty mentor, even your family members and friends. If they have more experience than you, even if it's just like you haven't started working, but you have a friend who has a job, they might be able to provide you with some feedback if all else fails, okay? All right. Tip number 4, build your reputation. What can you do to build your reputation? Okay. Sometimes it's as simple as how you choose to show up to work, your energy, your appearance. Are you dressing according to the job and the environment? You want to make a name for yourself by attending conferences, giving speeches or presenting, writing articles in your field. There are opportunities at time to do these types of things, or even here at Cal Poly, there's multiple opportunities to present. And even if you're just like, oh, well, I already presented on this research, do it again. If you have nothing new to present, but there's an opportunity to present, do it. You're building your not just your resume, but your reputation. And how you got to also consider, like, for instance, right now we're in a Zoom meeting. How can turning your camera on, how can that impact your reputation? Right now I can see names, but I may not see a face. But then if I see that name later on, or I see you on campus, you could be building just little bridges, right? Something as simple as choosing to have your camera on during Zoom meetings. And if you have to have your camera off, which is understandable, think about what photo you choose to display. I recommend displaying a photo if you can. I know sometimes mine just goes away I'm not sure why, so I got to re-upload it. But if you have a photo that you can use, then at least there's a face with the name. But be mindful of what photo you choose, because I have been in Zoom meetings where I'm like, oh, okay. So again, just be mindful. But I usually recommend that, like, we started this meeting not sharing our screen. That's a good time to have your camera on. When we start sharing the screen, that's when you can switch to camera off, because the presenter usually can't really see their audience as well. Part of building your reputation, and I share this story every year since it's happened, and I love that Dustin's here, because now maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, we had a tutor who was applying for a full-time position on campus because they had already graduated. And Dustin happened to bump into the hiring supervisor, and he found out that they were already conducting interviews that day, uh, even though the position was still open. They were already doing their interviews, and so Dustin told him like, "Oh, we have somebody who's going to be applying." Like I think they planned on submitting their application that day, and so they were like, yeah, well, we're already doing interviews and we're pretty much booked for the day. And Dustin made a comment. He said, well, you're going to be missing out on your best applicant. And that made the hiring supervisor think for a second, or because two reasons. Well, mostly because Dustin has a good reputation with this person, right? If Dustin's saying this about somebody, and Dustin's already established his reputation for being a good judge of character and work ethic and so forth, it made that supervisor say, okay, have them submit the application. If they can get it in by today, I will give them an interview. And what do you know? That person not only got their application in, not only got the interview, but they got the job. And that person that got the job had created a great reputation with Dustin, right? And it had they not, Dustin wouldn't have put himself out there like that, right? And so you want to make sure you're building a good reputation for yourself, right? And sometimes it's more a matter of where you happen to be, right time at the right place, right? Next slide. All right, this one is my biggest challenge. Show up 5 to 10 minutes early. So what I'd like you to do is, if you've ever shown up somewhere early, actually, to start with, if you ever showed up late and it had a negative impact, go ahead and give me a thumbs down. Is that an option on reactions?
I think so. They may need to search for it.
Yeah. So, or somebody you know where like they showed up late and they were too late for the interview, for the test, for their driving test, whatever it may be. Like, if you can think of an example of when that might have happened, you missed the bus, right? And then you didn't make it on time for something. So the opposite is true as well, where if you show up early, I don't know that anybody has an example of showing up early and it hurt you to show up early. If you do, let me know. I'd like to know about it. But people may not notice that you're early, but they'll definitely notice if you're late, or if you tend to be late, if you have, a tendency. If you arrive early, you appear more prepared and reliable than if you're on time or late. And you might be part of conversations that you otherwise would not have been part of if you arrived early. A couple weeks ago, oh, yeah, Dustin gave an example of showing up late for an interview, right? Now you got to explain yourself, or you feel bad. Um, but yeah, a couple weeks ago, or maybe a few weeks ago, they had the opening to the gallery exhibit, and somebody showed up early to the event. They were having a tour, and they got to an opportunity to meet with the artists and get to know them a little bit more. So showing up early can have its benefits, not just the fact that it's less stressful, right? Next one. All right. Let's see. This is yours, right, Patricia?
Yes, 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 yes. I take over from here. Uh, okay, so tip number 6, sharpen your people skills, build your network, and stay connected. Strong interpersonal skills can play a critical role in gaining the respect of coworkers, attract and notice influential people outside of your organization as well. And I have to say that this is an area I think where just after COVID and then a lot of this remote type of engagement has sort of put us back a little bit on those people skills. it's not to say that we can't get out there again and bring them to where they're at. But it's making sure that even if you're not comfortable talking to people, having a strategy in terms of like, how do I engage with people? How do I talk to strangers? There's actually a book that's called How to Talk to Strangers. But people skills, it can start with a handshake, right? So normally if we did this in person, we would all have you all shake handshakes and talk about how a handshake should be, how to do a proper handshake. But really your handshake when you're meeting someone, particularly in like a professional context, like we had a career fair last week, that's a perfect time to practice those handshakes. And so that is a way of you demonstrating, it really demonstrates a lot of nonverbal, your confidence, your comfort level, how you see yourself, just in that handshake. And then that usually leads to you kind of talking about yourself. Hi, I'm Patricia. I'm really interested in opportunities with X company. I've researched a lot about them, and I know that they focus on this area of auditing, and that's something that I've always wanted to do and have been focused on in my academics at Cal Poly. Like, what opportunities do you have? Right? It's that opportunity to introduce yourself, to kind of share about who you are. Be friendly, outgoing, and personable. Listen carefully to people and practice being a clear and effective communicator. My problem when I was younger is I wouldn't talk loud enough. And so people would always say, what'd you say? What'd you say? So I had to really learn to, increase my volume. And so now it's the opposite. Now I need to learn to like lower my volume. But it's being mindful of that. And, luckily I had people that feel comfortable to be honest with me, to let me know like what are areas that I can grow in. But I also had a job where that was a critical skill where I had to do like outreach and talk to strangers. And so it really forced me to develop that as well. Networking, typically we would do an activity, but because of time, that's not going to be reasonable. But it's finding something when you talk to strangers to connect with them on. When we're in college, the one thing we all have in common is your major. What are you studying? Why'd you pick your major? That can lead into a whole bunch of other types of things. Even employers that you're looking for went to college and studied something, right? So sometimes that is a way to engage someone in terms of like networking. But it's introducing yourself, sharing what you do for fun and interests you have as well. Sometimes we only focus on our professional goals, that we don't talk about like things that also contribute to who we are and make us stand out and make us more interesting as well. So and again, all of this in terms of networking is finding a common ground that you can build on, and then staying connected. What information do you need from people when you meet to facilitate staying connected? You need their name, their contact information, and a reason for following up, right? So Lauda's example at the gallery, right, would have been a perfect example of like following up. So it's that connection, and then finding out like what else can we do to stay in touch. But stay in touch. We're always telling students when we go to different things that we present, like, hey, reach out. I've only probably had 2 students in my whole professional career that actually did follow through, right? I mean, follow through. If someone's offering to help you, they're not saying it to be nice, hoping you won't follow through. They really want you to reach out and follow up. So follow up with them, share some interesting information. So it's like, hey, I read that book that you referred me to, or I did this, or I'm going to be pursuing this opportunity. Any tips? It can feel awkward, but once you get started, it can really just kind of develop into something more comfortable. But these are relationships that you never know how you can use them in your future, whether it's for a job, maybe it's going to develop into a mentorship. Like, you just never know, but it's really staying connected. And then again, you can consider how you can use social media to maintain your professional relationship. LinkedIn is an excellent tool. It's a no-brainer. That's what it's there for. All right, next slide. Tip number 7, be your best and be present. The best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today, which is really true. Different generations may have different expectations. Like Lauda and I, like the way we came up in the world of work and everything, it's very different than people that we're hiring now. So, you know, what you even define as be your best is different. But being present is something that I notice a lot of people struggle with because we're so distracted with so many things. Even today, right? Being present would be like at least showing our video. But, you know, there's things that distract us, whether it's be like comfort level or whatever, that we're not always present. So it's really understanding how to be present, how to be here for that moment, you know, how to not have distractions for you. Like right now, I didn't silence my Teams channel. I'm getting all these messages and it's like impacting my ability to be present. But I'm aware of it. And so I'm ignoring it. So it's really understanding what are the expectations of your employer. If you're not sure, ask. And then follow through. Engage and contribute in meetings. That's a way of demonstrating you're being present. The big one I always recommend is seek professional development. So, you know, even if they don't have budget, maybe they have things that you can attend and get some more experiences or some knowledge base that's going to help you. And never, never, never feel afraid to ask for help. Like that is the worst thing not to do. We want you to succeed in anything that you're doing, including like your professors. So ask for help. Be aware of what's going on in your job and within the organization. So don't just stay in your little bubble, like try to understand like beyond that bubble, because you never know what that can lead into. Take pride in your work. It's reflective in the quality of your work. Don't let others define your work for you. So for instance, if someone is slacking, don't slack. Even if it's frustrating to you, even if it feels it's not fair, it doesn't matter. You're going to be judged based on your own performance. Your best is knowing what you're capable of and challenging yourself to meet that, then challenging yourself to grow beyond that, right? So it's not just like, I'm going to be here, but like, okay, where do you ultimately want to go? I don't think we ever stop growing. And so if you have that mentality, then you'll always continue to grow in what it is that you do. We know when we're not doing our best. That is definitely true. Like I know that for me. When you are in that place, ask yourself why and what can you do about it? What's impacting your ability to do your best, right? Because that's important, because then it'll start eating you up when you know you just are not performing at that level. And at one point, your manager may notice as well. So that's not good either. Okay, tip number 8, share credit whenever possible. If you are recognized for a job well done, give credits to anybody else that contributed to the task, even if it was a minimal contribution. You know, this whole thing that like, oh, I did it all by myself. That's very rarely true. We usually have a lot of people that have helped us to reach those goals, even in work. This will demonstrate that you're a team player, and the contributors will appreciate it. I think we may have always been in that situation where someone takes credit for something and doesn't even acknowledge anybody else. That's a terrible feeling. So, you know, it's sometimes modeling that good behavior for others. Tip number 9, be alert for opportunities and act on them when they come up. Pay attention for those. Sometimes they come knocking at your door. You know, I mean, like Lado just gave an example. It could have been like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to help me find new artists or something like that. And you're like, whoa, like I just got here early and now I'm getting this opportunity that I could put on my resume and counts as experience. So you just never know. If you are following the previous tips, opportunities are more than likely going to present yourself because you're putting yourself out there, you're engaging, you're putting the most out of your work. And sometimes people will seek that out and say like, hey, would you want to be on this committee? I have this professional development opportunity. Would you want to be a part of that? You just never know. But again, like all of these things are really intended to collectively help you to really reach your goals. And if those things aren't happening, then talk to your manager, and make that an ongoing conversation. Like, hey, I once I learned my job, I want to get involved in different things, you know, and it doesn't always have to be things related to your job. I mean, here I was involved in an organization called the Latino Faculty Student Staff Association, and we raised money for scholarships for students. But there was a lot of other community-minded activities that it was just things I enjoyed. So not necessarily anything to do with my job, but something that I just did. And my bosses were okay with me doing that, because it was building connections and ultimately it was serving students. And tip number 10, keep learning. Be a constant learner. You should strive to continually acquire knowledge about your field. I mean, recently we did a workshop on AI because that is something that has grown so big that for a lot of us, we really had to learn and understand it, to be able to, even for ourselves, to use it, but to also to communicate to our students, like how AI can be a tool and how it can hurt you as well. But there's no way that you can ever stop learning. And if you start feeling you're at that point in your career, then it's like, okay, maybe I need to do something different. But really staying on top of developing trends in your field as well. Tip 11, and I referenced this earlier, is find a good mentor and follow their suggestions. I have so many different types of mentors. Some of them are my age, some of them are older, some of them I've known since I was in college, but I go to different ones depending on what it is that I need. And they really know me well enough to also give me some good information. So find a mentor in your career path that you are interested in, and you respect and trust, right? That's an important thing. Ask questions, follow their advice. I talked about that. Ask for constructive feedback. Sometimes this can be hard to hear, but it's valuable. If it's going to be good for you, it's a good thing. If you establish a positive relationship, your mentor might provide indirect assistance, such as mentioning your name when there's an opportunity. They can be your reference as well. It's mostly a take relationship, where you may feel like I'm just taking, but look for opportunities to give back help, or acknowledge your mentor, because you never know how they may need you. Maybe when you get to a certain place in your career, they may say, hey, can you come back and do this for me? But it really, sometimes they may feel like a one-sided relationship, but it isn't, because those who want to mentor someone really enjoy that, and that brings value to them. Tip number 12, know how and when to resign from a job, right? I see that a lot of this generation that is something that's an easy concept now. I don't think that was true like for ourselves. Like we would stay in it till probably like it was becoming unhealthy. But when you get to that place where you just don't feel challenged, you don't feel you're learning, you don't feel you're contributing, or you feel that this dynamic in this environment is not good for you, it's time to find something else. But do it in a good way. Don't burn bridges. There is a courtesy to give a 2 weeks notice for a job. If at all possible, do it in person. Provide a resignation letter. In some jobs, that is a requirement, but you're officially telling them, I'm leaving, this is the date that I'm leaving, and anything else extra that you'd want to say to them. Try to control the emotions behind the reason for your departure. Keep it natural, especially if you're just not happy. At the end of the day, it's not about whether they're just a terrible person. It's just that this is not a fit for me. And, hopefully you found something else that you're moving on to, because at the end of the day, none of that matters. You're going to go on. They're not going to be in your life. You're going to have something more positive for yourself, hopefully. Have a plan for your transition. Can you train your replacement, right? If that's something that you can offer assistance, that rarely happens, that they're able to find someone before you leave. But just offering to help in any of that's reasonable. Communicate with your human resources department. Know the exit process. Every organization has a different exit process. Consider things that right now may not seem important, but a lot of times when we're in jobs, we get insurance benefits. So when does my insurance run out? Are there any forms that I need to complete? When and where do you pick up your final paycheck? Where do you return any of your property or your keys? When do you lose access to anything? So those are all things to pay attention to. And again, I kind of talked about, like, in terms of when you know how to leave, is you're looking for growth, right? Sometimes a job is just really an entry point for you, and you're going to grow there, and then there's nothing else, right? So it's going to help you to get to the next level. So really, you're just looking for growth, or maybe you just want more leadership in a role. So you're looking for a position that's going to provide you that. That's growth as well. I talked about lack of job satisfaction in many ways, that you can be dissatisfied. And then there's the whole term, and I'm not sure if it's still like familiar with a lot of people, but the term quiet quitting, right? Where I'm just doing the most minimum. Particularly if that's not who you are, if you find yourself doing that, or just again meeting the basic expectations that you're not exceeding, or challenging yourself, again, you may want to reflect on that, because that can eat up on you as well. So really know how and when to resign from a job. And those are, wait, was it the 13 tips? How many tips?
Wow,
12 tips.
dozen.
A dozen tips. Yes, like eggs, but a lot cheaper than eggs.
Funny. Um, Before we ask for questions, I just wanted to point out this little image that we have on the right side of a book called The Defining Decade: Why Your 20s Matter and How to Make the Most of Them Now. And I read this book several years ago, and I think that it's a good recommendation. It doesn't just focus on like career tips, but other tips as well, even like relationship tips. And while it focuses on your 20s, I think that regardless of what your age is, you can learn from some of the tips in that book. If you happen to be under 20 or early 20s, you might read it and think like, oh, this just doesn't matter yet. It's not applicable, but it's always not, it's a great idea. If you can start preparing now for what you might need in 5 years, just generally speaking, and same thing would apply here. If you're already in your early 30s and you're like, well, it's too late for me, I think we can still learn. Like I said, I read it a few years ago and I was like, I wish I had thought about some of these points when I was in my 20s or when I chose a partner to date and so forth. So just wanted to put it there in case you would be interested in reading it. I'll actually drop the Amazon link in the chat in case you want to purchase it. And then I'm also going to send another reminder with our survey. But do we have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. Sometimes I think it's faster to unmute than to type in our questions. Do any of the professionals on here have any other tips they'd like to add while we're waiting for questions?
I guess the only thing I'll add is just always connect. Never, yeah, it's always about connection. Even if you don't think you're connecting with them, somehow life finds a way of reconnecting with them, reconnecting you with that person, so many years later. So always connect.
Thank you, Danielle.
Well, I was just gonna comment and say, the tip about showing up early, 5 to 10 minutes, early before like a job interview, or even just, you know, that can go as far as even just before your regular, scheduled shift, can create a positive precedent with you and your employer, right? And just kind of show your, time management skills, as well as also being punctual, can definitely go a long way, just even beyond just employment, but also just in everyday life as well.
Yeah, you can rely on me to be late. And then you can rely on Carlos or Dustin to be here before me. Yeah. I mean, I laugh about it, but it does bother me but there's always a reason behind it. I always tell anybody that's running late, though, more important that you get there safely than rush and cause an accident, even if it's like tripping on the curb because you're rushing to get here. Like safety first. But if we build in the plan to be early, that'll make it so that you're not rushing and possibly hurting yourself on the way in.
I think just to kind of piggyback on Lauda is, I think sometimes who we are at work can be different than who we are like in our personal. So if you feel like there's some skills that maybe you need to develop, then it's figuring out what are some strategies to do that. Like I think all of us in our programs, we have peer mentoring where we train our peer mentors to train our students on that, whether it's organization, time management, decision making, any of those things. So if you feel that you're struggling with something that's really getting in the way, then it's developing either learning knowledge and a system that'll work for you. And again, maybe this is something that you just apply to when you're at work. But if it's something that if it's going to create a negative reputation for yourself, then it's figuring out like, okay, let me control this before it controls me as well. Any questions?
Or comments? If you have an experience you want to share. Yes, Dustin.
I just think, to echo what Patricia was saying, now there's all sorts of ways that one can enhance their skill set, like, Google career certificates and cybersecurity or digital marketing and e-commerce, and they're relatively cheap through Coursera. And I think, back in our day, pre-internet, pre all of this stuff, it was very hard to supplement your skill set. But now you can just go online, type it in, figure it out, right? And if it's not on YouTube, you can figure it. You can take one of these courses that are relatively cheap online and really at your own pace. So I think that's a good way to supplement your skill set.
Yeah, that is very true. I know when I do advising sessions, especially for like those in computer science, and they'll say something like, I would love to be in that Python class. I'm like, great, but you don't have time or room. But guess what? I found a YouTube playlist where you can learn Python. And they're like, no way. I'm like, yes, way. I'm going to send it to you so you can learn it. They're like, okay, thank you. So again, even though we live in the world based on technology, because we have so many demands, those are things you forget about when you want to do something.
Yep, good point.
Well, we appreciate you showing up today. Well, I just realized I changed the I'm actually going to stop sharing. Showing up today for this, even with the evacuation drill. And you have our contact information. If you have any other questions, you can reach out. You can reach out to your respective programs, if you want to utilize them in some way, or just have more questions about like your own growth and your future prospects. Yeah, and so the recording will be available. You can reach out to your respective programs for that as well. But again, we want to thank you for your time. If you can fill out the survey link, that would be great, because that helps us to plan for future opportunities and workshops for you all as well.